You'll be aware if you've been with us in recent weeks or you've been keeping up online a bit, we've begun to put these on YouTube as well from our Monday service. We've been looking at some of the events from Jesus' life, which took place in the town of Capernaum, a little town on the northern edge of the Sea of Galilee where Jesus moved to and lived as an adult. And so this morning we're going to look at another event which takes place after Jesus has been off teaching elsewhere and he comes back to Capernaum. And so here's our reading on the screen for today from Luke's Gospel, chapter 7.
When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes. And that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the man who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well.
So, I think there's a lot in that little story of how Jesus healed a Roman centurion's servant. But I wonder if perhaps the first thing to note in light of our recent Capernaum capers is a detail that's mentioned about the synagogue in Capernaum there. If you remember this synagogue we can see on the screen here, this is a building which dates from around the 5th century, but it was built on the same spot as the synagogue which stood in Jesus' day. And again, you might recall, we looked at this, there's a little lower wall there, the darker stones, that's the remains, it's reckoned, of the synagogue from Jesus' day, and these more lighter stones were built on top of that same spot. What's interesting, though, is that this passage from Luke tells us that the synagogue in Jesus' day was in fact built by this same Roman centurion who's got the poorly servant. Indeed, the elders of the Jewish community in Capernaum, they come to Jesus and ask him to go and visit the sick servant because, as they say of this centurion, this man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. Now, quite apart, I think, from the historical detail that gives us, it's interesting that these Jewish leaders recognize that this Roman guy loves our nation, as they say. Indeed, he seems to be a good man with a generous heart, this centurion. Quite a thing, given the way the Romans were usually seen as the oppressive, occupying force of the time. And so how does Jesus respond to this request to visit this centurion's servant? Well, we're told Jesus went to him. Now, do we think that Jesus went simply because this centurion helped to build the synagogue, and that he deserves special treatment in response for his generosity or in return for his generosity, as the Jewish elders suggest? Well, no, see a few shaking heads. No, I don't think so. Favor with Jesus, favor with God can't be bought in that way. Rather, I think there's a detail here which is significant, as we're told this, that the centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. You see, as the local governing Roman officer, just as Roman soldiers could force people to carry their backpacks, for example, if they wanted to, so I guess this centurion could have forced, commanded almost, Jesus to come to him. He had that level of local authority. But no, instead, as we see in this verse, the centurion asks Jesus to come. He displays humility and deference to Jesus. And indeed, approaching Jesus in genuine humility and not a sense of entitlement. There's probably a good lesson in there for us and the way that we relate to Jesus. But as well as deference and respect for Jesus, it's clear that this Roman centurion has faith in abundance as well, because before Jesus can even get to him, he sends friends out to meet Jesus to effectively say, look, I trust you, Jesus. You don't need to come to my house in order to help my servant. I know you can do it from afar. Indeed, he says, just say the word and my servant will be healed. And this is pretty astounding, I think, to think this centurion knows he doesn't need to meet Jesus in the flesh to know that Jesus will still be at work in his and his poorly servant's life. No wonder Jesus is amazed to hear this, telling the crowds of Jewish folks around him. He says, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. It's quite a statement, it seems, to commend the faith of a non-Jewish Roman centurion as being greater than anyone else's he's met so far. It's a commendation which, once again, kind of mucks up perhaps any neat ideas we might have about who's in or who's out of God's kingdom, because Jesus always seems to champion the most unlikely, the most unexpected of people. I don't know if you noticed in that clip, I love Jesus' expression here, his face, a real sense of sort of amazement and wonder and joy at this centurion's faith. And Jesus does indeed heal his servant from afar there and then. And that, I would suggest, is perhaps the biggest encouragement for us this morning, because just like the centurion, none of us have met Jesus in person, in the flesh. And yet the fact that you're here, the fact that you have a faith in God, even if you might sometimes feel that your faith is no bigger than a mustard seed, perhaps, what I'd suggest, the faith God is growing in each of us is a cause for real joy for God too. Indeed, when the resurrected Jesus appeared to Thomas, who wanted to see Jesus in the flesh in order to truly believe he'd risen, Jesus tells him this. He says, Thomas, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. And that's us. That's us. That blessing is on offer to you and to me. We who believe in Jesus without ever having seen him. That blessing, the faith God grows in us. It's not a reason to feel smug or get cocky or sense of being superior to people in Jesus' day. As we've seen with the centurion, Jesus commends humility, not pride. But Jesus will bless us for believing in him. Bless us through the support of one another. Bless us through the community to which we can belong. Bless us that in faith we might in turn be a blessing to others, just as a centurion was a real blessing to his own servant. Indeed, I guess looking at this picture one last time, I think I use that kind of picture as a hopeful prayer, really, that God might help us to grow in our faith so that we too might prompt this kind of expression in Jesus, that we might bring Jesus joy in the way we believe and trust in him.